After 6 long years, we are finally here. The long-awaited sequel to Breath of the Wild has arrived and managed to follow in the footsteps of its predecessor, breaking the internet in a variety of new ways. The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom is here, and after roughly 100 hours with the game, I'm finally ready to discuss my experiences with the game. Before fully diving into this review and outlining all the core components, I have divided this review into 2 sections, the non-spoiler and spoiler, just for any of those that are still making their way through the game. I understand that many of you at this point have probably finished the game, but I just want to err on the side of caution. So don't worry if you are still making your way through the game. I've divided it up, and in the different chapters for this video, I will be having spoiler and non-spoiler chapters just to make sure that you can know where to go and what to avoid. So now, with that out of the way, we'll be diving into one of the more prominent questions for this before diving fully into it. And that question is about the more traditional Zelda experience, as for some, Breath of the Wild felt that it was a bit of a misstep and it was absent from many of the staples that were found in a Zelda game, such as the dungeons, the temples, and it felt like the divine beasts were not a strong enough substitution for many of these iconic pillars of the Zelda formula. But the biggest criticism was how sandbox heavy Breath of the Wild felt. I was in the camp that loved Breath of the Wild, but I can understand these criticisms. Now, does Tears of the Kingdom carry over this same structure found in Breath of the Wild? Well, yes and no. Let me explain. I will state that the shrines, towers, weapon durability, all of those things from Breath of the Wild are in Tears of the Kingdom, so if you didn't like that, chances are you won't like it here. But the flip side to this, to me at least, is a stronger sense of side content and side activities to partake in, as well as its core foundation of abilities, which are usually surrounded around creativity and building. And I think that Nintendo have really doubled down on the formula that was established in Breath of the Wild, but have put a stronger focus on this building and crafting mechanic that has kind of immortalized the game with an endless and boundless level of things that you can do that keep the game interesting for a long period of time. You can conjure up so many ideas, and if you watched my video where I discussed open worlds before, you would have noticed that I talked about the curiosity that was found in Breath of the Wild. Well, I think that Nintendo have been able to really take that core foundation of curiosity and couple it with another C word, creativity. And that is the real core pillar of Tears of the Kingdom, creativity. And that's what I'd like to get into now, is this philosophy that is what everything in Tears of the Kingdom is rooted in. So now, let's get into that. Last year, I made a video detailing the beauty of curiosity-driven open worlds. I regarded Breath of the Wild as one of the iconic staples of this form of design philosophy present throughout the game, guiding the player in any direction they see fit to uncover all of Hyrule's mysteries. I discussed how the game's visual design sparked a strong sense of perceptual curiosity that encouraged players to set out on their own adventures based more on what they saw rather than what they were being instructed to do. While this approach to world design has returned here in Tears of the Kingdom, it isn't the only central pillar of the game's design philosophy. In Tears of the Kingdom, curiosity works more as a jumping pad for this game's core pillar, creativity. I'm intentionally mentioning the curiosity of Breath of the Wild because that sense of curiosity will seep into Tears of the Kingdom in similar and new ways that you've experienced. However, where perceptual curiosity is the core driver for player exploration, epistemic curiosity is where there's the desire to learn and obtain new information and build our understanding, and it's something that Tears of the Kingdom utilizes and is what makes it such a boundless experience. The capacity to learn, experiment, and test the limits of our knowledge is something that we strive for in both the real world and in our video games. This sense of curiosity on multiple levels elevates Tears of the Kingdom and differentiates it from its predecessor. It marries and gels these aspects of curiosity and creativity. You've probably seen clips by now on the internet for all the things and creations that people have made in the game, but if you haven't, here's some that just come to mind. Whilst I've opened up this segment talking about the curiosity in Tears of the Kingdom, the big central pillar of Tears of the Kingdom is creativity, and more importantly, how they inspire the player to get creative. This epistemic curiosity, how do they do it within this game? It can take player curiosity and both create solutions and stories through the player and its sandbox. Tears of the Kingdom plays between these two ideas so effortlessly. It is continuously introducing new objects, weapons, ideas, and items and devices that you can experiment with. How Tears of the Kingdom accomplishes this is, well, let's go through a step-by-step process. The starting point is introducing a new object or new objects that are in the point of question. It could be a log, a sail, or some fans. The initial flare of curiosity that stems from associative thinking is what kicks off any good experiment. It sparks interest through just how bizarre and crazy you can get with these creations. The next step is trial and error. So, there are many times when you will fail, and trust me, you will fail. A creation will backfire. That's part of the fun. But not only is this an experience in of itself, but it is a natural aspect of the creative life cycle, where once you succeed, you will feel like an absolute genius for all the times that you failed prior. And Tears of the Kingdom has this nailed in spades. The reward here in Tears of the Kingdom's sandbox doesn't come through stat buffs, level ups and gear and new things you acquire, but more through knowledge and expertise, which builds on the foundation of any good creative sandbox and framework that you engage with. And finally, that final step is taking that acquired knowledge from previous creations and taking the more unconventional approach and taking another risk, fueled by your curiosity, asking that one simple question, will this work? And it is at that point that we have come full circle and begun the creative process all over again. Tears of the Kingdom's sandbox will continue to surprise you, unraveling new methods, ideas, and strategies, even after hundreds of hours of playing this game. You will start your adventure and you will feel rusty. Your ideas may fall apart, but that's the thing with Tears of the Kingdom. The more you interact with these systems, the more you engage with them, the more creative you get, the more it gives back to you with its knowledge and its outcomes. The world of Hyrule has never felt so alive and so masterfully crafted here, and Tears of the Kingdom has built on everything that Breath of the Wild established and done it 10 times better with a new element known as creativity. And they really have found a winning formula here, and it is something that'll keep Tears of the Kingdom fresh and will keep us going through YouTube shorts looking at new creations and designs for years to come. What makes Tears of the Kingdom so insane to me is the sheer amount of scope of content that is just scattered throughout Hyrule. It really does dwarf Breath of the Wild, making the core loop of that game feel more like a starting point and a blueprint, and then it iterates on it in this crazy way that you just wouldn't think possible like all those years ago. They really have found a way to go above and beyond here. The first thing of the returning activities that you would expect is the return of shrines, a short set of puzzles that reward you with a light of blessing, which, much like in Breath of the Wild, will allow you to upgrade your health and stamina. However, here in Tears of the Kingdom, I feel like the shrines provide more satisfying puzzles, ways of thinking, and new tools that can be added to your creative arsenal. Where in Breath of the Wild, many of the puzzles would revolve around the 4 tools that Link had, there is a much broader depth here with the variety of tools found in Tears of the Kingdom, as they provide a much broader depth of how Link can interact with both those tools and how they interact with the environment. Tears of the Kingdom takes this whole idea and enables the ability to build and craft objects that can interact with each other, elevating the range of solutions and creativity. Tears of the Kingdom manages to accomplish this through the amount of freedom that the abilities in this game offer, which we will discuss a bit more later. It can feel a bit more straightforward at times and boundless in its capabilities and limitless in its form of mastery. There is so much here that you can do and so many ways that you can kind of complete the puzzles that don't feel like they were the intended way, but feel satisfying because you thought of it and it was your solution. Another immediately noticeable addition in Tears of the Kingdom is how many of the puzzles for these shrines are in the open world for you to solve. Sometimes the mystery is not completing the shrine, but figuring out how to reach a particular shrine or activate that shrine. It is a fantastic method that merges the open world, Link's tools, and the curiosity of the environment that I was discussing before, and it elevates the core components of the Zelda formula, whilst you are not just being curious of how to get to a place, but also how to just figure out how to activate a particular shrine. And like I just mentioned, there is no one way to solve any puzzle. There is multiple ways, so it really just enables you to think outside of the box and find your own clever path to fix a said problem. And that brings me to my last point on this topic, which is there is a multitude of of ways to solve these problems. In many other games, and sometimes even in Breath of the Wild, solutions may feel like the devs want you to do one particular thing. Here in Tears of the Kingdom, you can approach and solve those problems in front of you in various ways that deviate from that ideal solution that they've intended for you. The level of flexibility here is just insane, and it really does feel like you earned these things through creative thinking, and it's a testament to the level of depth that Tears of the Kingdom sandbox offers. It provides a comprehensive system for assembling and experimenting with many different concepts introduced, and whilst it can feel finicky at times trying to paste things together and make your different ship or box or whatever you're trying to do it yourself build on the fly, it does feel satisfying once you do make that thing. It does feel overall like such a satisfying conclusion once you do get that solution that you've earned and thought of yourself. And that's one thing that I feel like you can't take away from this sandbox. It ultimately makes the shrines and puzzles of Tears of the Kingdom a lot more satisfying and a lot more robust and replayable with how you approach each different situation with different shrines. So you complete Shrine A and you have acquired particular knowledge, with using fans, and you'll make that applicable in future shrines where you may need a fan. Stuff like that. It's just little things, and they all kind of click together. And like I said before, knowledge is power, and that is the big thing that you are building, and that is the main arsenal that you are building in Tears of the Kingdom. Towers see a return here in Tears of the Kingdom, and they operate fairly similar to how they do in Breath of the Wild functionality-wise, paving out the map and telling you new areas that you've discovered once you've completed a particular task. But not only Hyrule here, they also fill out the new Sky Isles, which we'll discuss more thoroughly later on. But what's new here with the towers in Tears of the Kingdom is that they serve as an iconic tower that you can shoot yourself up through and look around and scatter your areas. They allow you to move more freely around the map and use your glider and make more efficient use to go to new areas, even those new Sky Isles that I was discussing. There is a new level of functionality, and it really is cool here that the towers are given a lot more use case and a lot more freedom to allow you, the player, to move around and navigate Hyrule more freely. And this is pretty accessible early on into the game, and I think that that's just great. It really does just allow you to maneuver in many directions and gives you a mode of transport that isn't just relying on a horse. And I think that it still does call to action that level of curiosity, because you can still see things and glide off in that direction. So it's not like it's taking away from anything, but just providing you a new cool method. And there is a lot here, both in the air and on the ground, that you can discover, and I think that it's just fantastic. The towers have been reworked to become more engaging, and even once you've discovered them, they're now given a reason for you to actually go and visit them quite regularly, because sometimes I just want to be shot in the air, like being shot out of a cannon, and just being able to freely travel in a particular direction. I think it's cool, and I really do like that. But that's enough for the actual gameplay and mechanics. We're going to move now into the new abilities, because I want to dive into that a bit more, and that'll discuss the combat and some of the new creative crafting tools that we have in the game. So now we'll get into that. The first and most transformative of your abilities is the Ultrahand. This will be the bread and butter for all your different contraptions and inventions that you'll be building in Tears of the Kingdom. How the Ultrahand works is that it allows you, Link, to pick up objects similar to the magnet ability in Breath of the Wild, but here in Tears of the Kingdom it is much more expansive, letting Link pick up almost any object that can be interacted with. But on top of that, the Ultrahand enables Link to glue two or more particular things together and works in a familiar fashion to a builder tool from a survival game. It allows you to rotate, position, and click into place each component of your original creation. And it feels a little finicky at first, but you slowly adapt and get used to how this ability works the more you engage with it. Ultrahand is a game changer, seriously. The level of creativity and strategy that it offers the player in how you can approach so many situations and the environment in Tears of the Kingdom, it is absolutely astonishing. And people to this day, months after its release, are still finding new ways to traverse the environment and tackle different puzzles. And that is really just a testament to just how incredible this game is. And I imagine in 3 to 4 years time, people will still be finding new ways and new exploits to speedrun the game and complete different activities. Because whether you're approaching shrines, combat, or just general exploration, Ultrahand is an essential staple tool, and it is so helpful, and it's pivotal to the boundless level of mastery given how easy it is to use. One thing that I love about the Ultrahand ability is how it works with many of the different puzzles found throughout Hyrule, but more importantly, the shrines, where in Breath of the Wild, each shrine would have its own particular solution to the problem. Tears of the Kingdom does feel like you can solve a significant portion of these puzzles by unconventional means, making it feel more rewarding and satisfying when you complete it in your own unique way. This level of player satisfaction is derived from the level of flexibility in Link's abilities and how you are able to use them. It is very free but logical in how you can attach things together and think about how they will operate. Putting a bunch of fans on a wooden plank may have it fly off, but in what direction? Applying extra additional weight may balance things out. The physics as well, when you shoot something off a cliff and how it will fly off and what direction it'll go in, they're all logical things, and this ties back to that trial and error that I mentioned earlier. And what makes that trial and error so satisfying is how logical and intuitive it is to pick up and play around with many of the different tools, objects, and systems here, and more importantly, the abilities and how they lay host to the overall sandbox of the game and make figuring out these little puzzles of building these inventions so fun and intuitive to engage with. So, a big part of what makes this Ultrahand ability so enticing and so fun to engage with is this newly introduced mechanism in Tears of the Kingdom called Zonai devices. So what are Zonai devices? Well, they are tools such as fans, gliders, springs, many different things that can work as a utility to elevate your building. These devices are so essential to the building process. As you complete more different shrines, more of these devices will become available, as shrines in this game are usually a jumping pad to introduce many of these new Zonai devices. And then you can acquire many other ones for your travels out in the wild through what are called Zonai dispensers. So what makes these Zonai devices so worthwhile? Well, they usually are a function of sorts. So you can have a bunch of logs and staple them all together and glue them all together, and you will have, well, 3 logs glued together. That's not really that useful. But when you start to attach things like a fan, then you start to see it move in the water. And what do you know? You have a boat. These Zonai devices are really key to the overall experience because these are the mechanisms that make things go. They make things work. They are the key to the overall experience and what makes the Ultrahand ability so useful and desirable. You can have something like what I would call a static object, which is the logs, but then you can add something like a fan to it and make it a transformative object. You then have a boat. You have something. You take something like a glider and you attach a fan to it, and then you can fly. This to me is what separates Tears of the Kingdom and its sandbox from Breath of the Wild, and what I think really does take it and elevate it to the next level. It's this type of thinking that the game has baked into its core gameplay loop. I see a lot of people saying this, Tears of the Kingdom is just Breath of the Wild 1.5, and I'm like, well, no, it's not. Its sandbox is elevated to a whole new degree. These Zonai devices provide a whole new mechanism for traversal, but also combat, which we'll get into in a moment. There is so many different things you could do with these Zonai devices. At the same time, you can't abuse them, and that's where batteries come into play. So batteries, as you've probably guessed, power things. You'll start off with a certain level of power, one battery which has 3 charges, and the more Zonai devices that you attach to a particular creation drains the power quicker, meaning it needs to use more resources and more power to keep the device running. As you play through the game, Link will acquire certain things to upgrade how much power he can have and how many batteries he can run at a certain period of time. You can also find battery dispensers that you can attach and power your devices with. I think this is a great system because it makes sure that you're not getting too overpowered too early by just attaching things together and being able to just fly away into the distance. It really does keep you grounded and makes you have to think and be strategic with the resources of how many Zonai devices you're attaching to something and how much power and juice you can get out of that thing before you need to recharge it. It's a great little management system that works on top of the actual building aspect of the game too, because it adds a level of practicality to the actual functionality of your creation. And I just think that this level of depth that is put into this game is absolutely insane. And the things that you see people create, whether it's a Gundam, a pod racer, it is absolutely astounding. And I think for years to come, we will continue to just see the crazy creations people have made. The next ability is the Fuse ability. So I was going to discuss the returning feature from Breath of the Wild here, that is the inclusion of weapon durability, But here in Tears of the Kingdom, whilst that feature does see a return, it is more heavily coupled with this concept of fusion. This brings me to Link's new ability, the fuse ability. This mechanic has an emphasis on fusing both weapons with objects, items, and Zonai devices that are found throughout Hyrule. Combining different items provides different effects for your weapon. For example, you can attach an explodable barrel onto your shield that explodes when the enemy hits your shield, or attach a cannon to a spear that works kind of like a cannon gun. There is endless possibilities here, and there is so many different combinations that you can use here and progress throughout the game. As you complete more shrines, like I mentioned before, you'll have more tools, more devices to attach, mix and match, and make some more crazy weapons. On top of the utility that comes from using these weapons, such as your cannon gun, there is also materials that you can use to fuse a weapon that can add extra durability and increase damage and buff your weapons. And after many of the complaints that were found in Breath of the Wild, particularly around durability, I do think that this is a welcomed addition here in Tears of the Kingdom. However, I don't think that it fully fixes the durability problem, as I feel like sometimes your weapons can still break fairly quickly, but I do think that it is a nice way to get more mileage out of each individual weapon. And whilst it isn't perfect, I do think that it is a much better implemented system here in Tears of the Kingdom, and there are plenty of reasons to make you want to experiment rather than sticking to one weapon. And I think that weapon durability eventually will just force you to have to mix things up. On top of shield and sword combat, you can also fuse different items and materials to your arrows. These fused arrows will also have other effects when shot. Some good examples of this are using a fire fruit, making the arrow turn to fire, similar to the fire arrows in Breath of the Wild, or shooting a puff shroom on the ground, which will create a mist of smoke between you and the enemy. I've listed 2 examples here, but there are so many different mechanics. There is these bat wings that you can attach as well, which auto-lock to enemies in the sky. There are so many, hundreds of unique different combinations that just make combat feel a lot more engaging, and this aspect of the bow and arrow experience in Tears of the Kingdom, I feel like has a lot more variety in how you can approach and use many different items, opposed to Breath of the Wild, where you had 4 different standard types of arrows. And whilst both I feel are fitting and great in their own ways, I think Tears of the Kingdom really takes the cake here with player expression and ways to approach different situations, where you can fully utilize your inventory and consistently experiment with the environment. I think one of the greatest accomplishments here in Tears of the Kingdom is just how they make every in-the-moment discovery feel worthwhile in some way, like it feeds back into something, whether it's just some random object that can be used as an Ultrahand creation, or some fruit or mushroom that you find on the floor that can be used to be attached to your arrows or your weapons to just really have an effect in some way. It really does make everything in the game feel worthwhile and worth checking out, and really does breathe curiosity into every facet of the game. The next ability in Link's arsenal is Recall, and much like its name suggests, it allows the player to rewind the state of an object, meaning that you can reverse time on a particular object up to a particular point in time. What makes Recall so interesting to me is how you can manipulate both time and space in a specific way that can provide utility both in and out of combat. It is used to get to out of reach positions where you can neatly position an object at a lower point that Link can reach, and then have the object reverse and go up like an escalator, or being able to reverse time on a rock that an enemy has thrown at you, which will hit them instead. There is numerous ways that you can use this Recall ability, and if Ultrahand is revolved around creation, then Recall is revolved around dismemberment and putting things back into their original state. A nice little yin and yang between these 2 abilities. One cool thing about Recall is that in Tears of the Kingdom, when creating, you will make mistakes. You might accidentally hit something or have something fly away. The beauty of Recall is that it allows you to compensate for some of these mistakes and reverse like an undo button. It allows for a insane level of object manipulation, and is another clever and quirky way that you can navigate through many of the different shrines that wouldn't be possible in the previous game. To me, when I look at abilities like Recall, I am clearly reminded that this is not a Breath of the Wild 1.5. This is a new game in its entirety. You look at the way that these abilities like Recall can manipulate the physics and the systems here that the engine is built upon, the logic that this game uses, not only through its Ultrahand and its Zonai devices, but also through its Recall and how you can use this ability. It is so cleverly crafted, and it's so crazy to imagine just how much work and how Nintendo were able to put this game on the Nintendo Switch, a 6-year-old console, and make this game 15 gig. It is actually crazy to me. This is insane. If I was to describe the abilities given to Link in Tears of the Kingdom, I would say that the core words that I would use is state and manipulation. All of the abilities revolve around taking a object or something that was in one default state and then marrying, merging, or changing it into a different state, or transformation, a formation of a different sort. And here, recall is the Uno reverse to the Ultrahand's +4, the creation, the building. And I think that it is just so well thought out and cleverly made. And I think that this system offers so much depth that even some sandbox games haven't fully figured out yet. And that is one thing that I really do love about Tears of the Kingdom. So now we'll be moving on to the final core ability that we'll be discussing. Okay, so the final ability, this one is one of the most astonishing abilities to me, because on paper, when you look at it, you might be like, oh, that's nothing too crazy, but it's something that I've been missing ever since I completed my playthrough of Tears of the Kingdom. And I've been playing other games and been like, damn, I wish they had this, it would be kind of cool. And that's the Ascend ability. This works because it enables you to dive upward through a roof within reach. So you can find your way to navigate through many of the different surfaces here, and it is clever in allowing you to manipulate how you traverse through the terrain. So again, feeding into that thing of manipulating a state of an object. In this instance being Link, it allows you to traverse through different planes going up through a roof of a surface that has a certain limit that you can reach. You can't just, like, you know, if you're at like a bottom of a mountain, just traverse through the top if the roof is like too high. So it has its limits, but in most instances it allows you to get creative and even solve some puzzles this way with thinking outside the box. Ascend works really well with Link's other abilities too, mainly the Ultrahand and Recall, as in many different instances, like I was mentioning before, you can move an object around and then recall that object so it's within reach, but if it's still just a bit out of reach, you can perfectly time it so you can ascend through the object and get to it that way. There's a lot of clever thinking that is involved in trying to execute all of these different plans in Tears of the Kingdom, and all of these abilities interlock with each other really well and really seamlessly, making them all feel like they all work really well together and can collaborate to pull off some of the finest ideas. The Ascend ability works incredibly well, and it makes traversing the hills, escaping caves much easier than it would be in, say, Breath of the Wild. It also allows you to find your way into buildings, landmarks that may appear out of reach at first. It also allows and fixes some of the problems that you might find with the original game. So if it's raining, you might find it a bit annoying climbing, unless you have an elixir or the froggy armor, but this Ascend ability is a nice way around that, because in many instances you can find a way to kind of ascend something you're climbing if you think it through the right way. It can also work in various combat situations too, where I was fighting a Talus and I let him slam on the ground, and then there was a position where I could ascend through him and get on the top of him and start fighting the enemies up there and whittle away at him. And it was really cool just to like think about it and figure out different ways to approach either combat or traversal, and just navigating the world itself is just insane. There is an endless, like I've said this many times in this review, and I'm just going to keep going over it. There is endless and boundless possibilities found in Tears of the Kingdom, and it's just by how these abilities work and how they make it possible. There are so many different things and little discoveries that you'll make that feed into your curiosity that then cycle back to allowing you to get creative with how you use them yet again. As I mentioned earlier, it is an epistemic thing. It feeds into the system, allows you to experiment, and Ascend is just the cherry on top to what is a great assortment of tools that you can use as Link on a foundational level. So here we are, the new addition to Tears of the Kingdom that Nintendo has shown off front and center since revealing this game, and that is the addition of the Sky Isles, which is absolutely fantastic, and it works on so many different levels. One of the things that I love the most about the Sky Isles is how it approaches puzzles, and more importantly, shrines. So without retreading old ground, let's just keep this brief, because the Sky Isles does have a familiar sense that it does on ground, but here it is a lot different. And the biggest difference that I can tell you is that it interacts more with the open world, having you find a way to activate the shrine rather than the activity taking place in the shrine. And given the fragmented nature of these Sky Isles, it makes for a unique and different sort of puzzle as you are interfacing more with the open world and trying to figure out ways to solve these different varied puzzles. And I think that challenge is a much welcomed one and an innovative transformation to the whole shrine formula that was established in the previous game. Nintendo have found a new creative way here to try and make these puzzles a lot more elevated and fun and make more use of the toolkit of abilities that Link is provided. So yes, the Sky Isles is quite fulfilling in terms of the activities that take place on them, and the overgrown Aztec-like architecture is really incredible. But what makes the Sky Isles so fulfilling as well is just getting to them in general, which is where the towers come into play. We've touched on that earlier in this review, but I think that half the satisfaction is the puzzle of trying to get to these shrines, get to these locations within the Sky Isles, and it is honestly breathtaking just gliding across to one, and just every single time it feels unique and different, and it is just great, and it's something that never gets old even after 100 hours of playing. And I think that the variety of enemies and things that you'll encounter on the Sky Isles are really unique, fun, and transformative to this formula that Nintendo is building with the Zelda series. And I think going forward, I would love to see more stuff like the Sky Isles, because there is an enormous amount of fun, and the way that they approach the shrines, puzzles, and things on this area and plane is incredible. And I'm going to get into how Nintendo tackles verticality so well later on in the spoiler segment on this review, so stick around for that. But the TLDR is that Sky Isles are fantastic. So the general topography of Hyrule remains intact. However, there is a lot of different things here that change it from Breath of the Wild. It still has all the same areas that have different environmental effects, but there is also a new blight on the land that is referred to as gloom. This red, gooey looking ailment has many other effects on the area that you traverse and how you traverse it. Stepping through gloom will remove one of your available hearts from being healed until you are able to remove yourself from that location or transport to a resting spot or landmark for healing. The gloom plays a host to many other sinister threats, which we'll discuss in the spoiler segments of this review. But overall, the gloom and how it works and the impact that the Demon King had really does fracture and reshape the map of Hyrule, making it feel a lot more fragmented, much like the Sky Isles in some ways. I would say that this inclusion of gloom is only one of the many things that does separate and reform Hyrule, and I'll dive into how different Hyrule is as a location in the spoiler segment. But for now, I will say that this isn't just a one-to-one copy of Hyrule here. There is a lot of differences. It is something that plays on the familiarity of Breath of the Wild, but also takes it and reshapes it in many different ways, so it won't be a walk in the park if you played the previous game, but it will play on that nostalgia and maybe even sometimes trick you into thinking, because you might think you know something because you've played the previous game, and throw a curveball at you. I think that Tears of the Kingdom here has a lot more going on in its world, and it feels a lot more populated, whether it's the challenging enemies, the fortified bases, or the things that you can engage with in the terms of the items and things you can build. There is a lot more here that really does elevate and transform Hyrule, and I do feel like in this game, I kind of touched on it earlier, Hyrule does feel like it's in the midst of a war, and it actually does feel war-torn, and I will get more into that later on, but I do think this is something here that really does keep the world itself feeling alive and brought to life. It breathes some new air into the world of Hyrule that I feel like Breath of the Wild was kind of desolate in a way, and it fit the tone of that game. But here in Tears of the Kingdom, it really does feel and capture that sense of a war-torn Hyrule, the tears and tears of that kingdom. There's another thing that I would like to get into that has seen its return in Tears of the Kingdom, and it's the sandbox, the inner workings and systems that remain intact here. So I talked about environmental effects earlier, and it's been iterated on here in a lot of different ways, but most of it still remains intact. And although you're probably familiar with how it works, having played Breath of the Wild, I would just love to just touch on it for a second again, because I feel like this concept of cause and effect within the world is just fantastic, and I'm glad that they've upheld and kept a focus on it. So what are these systemic systems for those who don't know? Well, these systems work in a way where it has a cause and effect. The world feels like it has systems where an action or one object interacting with another will cause a certain cause and effect. So hitting grass with fire will cause that grass to burn. Wearing metal in the rain where there's lightning will increase your probability of getting struck by lightning, and even wooden objects will get struck by lightning too and catch fire. These type of things make the world feel more real, alive, and engaging, and this was one of the things about Breath of the Wild that I feel like really made the game shine and really made the world feel like the inner workings of its system were incredible and actually real. And I think that this, coupled with the physics and the way that you can manipulate the environment in Tears of the Kingdom, just elevate this game to a new level, making everything you do feel logical within this world. Here in Tears of the Kingdom, they have really doubled down on this, and some may like that and some may hate that. For me personally, I really did love this, and I think that it is one of the things that keeps this game feeling fresh throughout. Yes, there's a few grievances with these types of systems that I have, like the weapon durability and things breaking super quickly. It's a bit annoying. Climbing in the rain can be a hassle, but overall, it's a part of that experience in a grand scheme of a working system that can either work to your advantage or disadvantage whether or not you are prepared to tackle it, and it makes you think on the fly, and that's the whole point of it. You can complain and say that it's arbitrarily stupid, but I think it works really well. I think that it is something that makes you think and keeps you on your feet throughout your whole playthrough. The whole game is about adaptability and adapting to your environment, and it tries to make this a real life sim in a way where you have to be adaptable and agile with how you approach the environment and the world is out to get you in some senses. And overall, I think the system, whilst it shined bright in Breath of the Wild, really has blown me away here in Tears of the Kingdom with how it interlocks with all the more broader moving parts of Tears of the Kingdom's sandbox. And that is something that I will truly never forget. The story for Tears of the Kingdom picks up a few years after the events of Breath of the Wild and sees Link accompany Zelda to explore and discover the ruins underneath Hyrule Castle. After a turn of events, Link and Zelda become separated and an evil entity known as the Demon King emerges from his slumber to plague and unearth the different pieces of Hyrule and usher in his reign of chaos. Without spoiling too much of the story in this segment, I'll say that I'll be dividing this into a non-spoiler section and then discussing it more thoroughly later on in this review in the spoiler section. But I'll let you know this much as a non-spoiler. I love the story, and I think if you found Breath of the Wild a little bit light on the story side, I think Tears of the Kingdom does have a lot more going on here in terms of narrative moments and connections with characters and things going on. The stakes are a lot more higher here in the game, and it has a much higher story focus and feels like a middle point in terms of storytelling between a more traditional Zelda game and what Breath of the Wild was doing. So whilst I don't think it is the definitive Zelda story, I do think that it still has a pretty compelling one, and one that is compelling all the way through. So with this out of the way, that does conclude the non-spoiler part of this review. So I would suggest clicking away now if you're still making your way through Tears of the Kingdom, or waiting to play it, because now I'll be diving into aspects of the game that I would consider spoiler heavy, both in the exploration sense and in terms of its story. So you're welcome to come back and watch this whenever you like, and now we'll be continuing with the spoiler segment of this review. If there's one aspect of Tears of the Kingdom that still has me completely blown away, it is the inclusion of the depths. Nintendo would show off that new explorable area called the Sky Isles, which we discussed earlier, throughout all of the promotional material. It would market this as the core new explorable location for Tears of the Kingdom. And whilst the Sky Isles are unique and expansive in what they offer, they did hide one significant new location: the core centerpiece that would accompany Tears of the Kingdom's narrative, providing an added dimension to the exploration. And that of course is the depths. The depths serve as the counterpart to the Sky Isles. The yin and yang relationship between these two areas is shared by contrast thematically, and one of the things that makes the depths so exciting to explore is its approach to exploration. When you first descend down into the depths, you'll be diving into the dark, making it hard to determine when to land and where to land. Thankfully, you'll be given an item called Bright Bloom Seeds, which light up the area around you when they touch the ground. The depths is such an incredible addition to the overall experience of Tears of the Kingdom. It's like you're playing a whole new game in a way. Having to light up the area around you and trying to look and gauge your surroundings with very minimal vision, it really does strip you of something that the other two areas provide you by default, making the environment feel way more threatening and making this dark, mystical world feel a lot more engaging and enticing to explore. In a lot of ways, the depths in Tears of the Kingdom remind me of the big hole, the abyss in that anime Made in Abyss, if you've seen that, which I would highly recommend, by the way. It feels like everything is out to hunt you. You have gone from being on these other two planes where you have got all these different devices, all these tools, and you feel like you are the hunter hunting people, and the roles in the depths have reversed and you are now the hunted. Half the fun just being able to navigate and look around and see a bunch of different enemies that are way stronger than you and trying to think tactically on what you can and can't fight early on into the game. Later on, these things are still somewhat of a challenge, but they are more approachable. And overall, I think the depths is full of charm and it is a great addition to the game, and it is something that makes the more survival elements of Tears of the Kingdom come to life in a very different way. Where the top two planes are more focused on base building, I feel like the literal word of survival is what the depths is centered around, trying to understand your surroundings, your bearings, and trying to get the advantage on many of the enemies that'll be stalking you down in the depths. When I first descended down in there early in my playthrough, it was one of the most memorable moments in the whole game for me, as this interconnected labyrinth that lives under Hyrule offers you no map, barely any vision, and is surrounded by some of the most challenging enemies that you'll encounter. It was a thrilling moment in my playthrough. I hadn't started the quest that showed me the underbelly of Hyrule, so this was very new to me. I was manually figuring out how the bright seeds worked and how to navigate both the gloom, the enemies, and many of the things around here, and it was such an engaging part of the experience to me. Finding that first light route was a real beacon that lit up and actually provided me a sense of security before stepping back out into the dark unknown. The depths are one of the biggest highlights of the Tears of the Kingdom experience for me. Each time I jumped down a chasm, I was excited about what I would find. This punishing dark below is another massive puzzle within of itself, whether you're trying to map it out, trying to understand this labyrinth of a place, and many of the challenging different enemies that you'll find under here. I talked about how this game builds on your curiosity and creativity through these epistemic means of attained knowledge. Well, here in the depths, it's a different type of attained knowledge that you'll be acquiring. What types of items light up the area, what type of enemies occupy these areas, how to find light routes, how they work, and how light routes are interconnected with shrines. There's many different little hidden puzzles and hints that will make your experience a lot easier, and it's only through this desire to explore through curiosity and this type of knowledge that you'll acquire through venturing forth and pressing on that you will really start to conquer the depths. So now we'll be talking about the dungeons, the labyrinths, the big thing, the centerpiece of Tears of the Kingdom. These environments are the big staple to the Zelda experience. They usually take the form of a temple, a palace, a divine beast, and the like. Here in Tears of the Kingdom, we see them return in the form of temples. Like many other Zelda games, these temples are elemental themed and feel like a response to the divine beasts from Breath of the Wild. I'd say that the temples here in Tears of the Kingdom feel a lot more satisfying in many ways than the divine beasts, and the reason for that is, well, let's get started. The overall theming for these temples feels a lot more well thought out. The puzzles that are encapsulated in these temples feel like they are related to the element, but also the sage that accompanies you on this journey, meaning that you get more time with them and developing their story and the overarching story and seeing the wreckage left by the Demon King for all the inhabitants of Hyrule. You get to have time with these sages, and from a gameplay perspective, also get to play around with a mechanic that they will give you, and you get to permanently acquire once completing the temple. Puzzles throughout many of these temples will require you to utilize this particular mechanic, meaning that you get to play around and solve using different puzzles from what you would normally be doing in shrines, making the temples feel like that big juggernaut experience that they are in the Zelda games, giving you meaningful upgrades like traditional Zelda games, whilst still providing that fun sandbox way to approach them that Tears of the Kingdom offers. I think that there is a bunch of unique things here with these temples that merges the old with the new for Zelda, and I think that it's great. You get to go on an experience with these sages, you get to see these different forms of enemies and plagues that have ruined these temples, you get to fight back, use unique abilities, and solve a bunch of interesting puzzles that really encompass the element of that particular temple. There is so much cool stuff here, and on a larger picture, it really does seem like a good way forward for these temples in these types of Zelda games. I think that they do offer a lot more more meaningful puzzles and problem solving than the divine beasts of Breath of the Wild, and I feel like they offer more interaction with the different races and sages of the world of Hyrule, and overall I think that this is a great way forward. I do kind of wish that we got to see a bit more with the sages and more of their backstory and more things with the sages of now and getting to interact with the player a bit more, but I think that it is great overall, and that is just a minor gripe. And I think that the dungeons and temples feel very rewarding and very satisfying. They may not be the definitive top of the line best in the whole series, but I think that they are up there and they are very satisfying, and they are a fun big centerpiece to the overarching journey of Tears of the Kingdom. So now we'll dive into the side content, the side quests and activities in Tears of the Kingdom. If there is one subset of side quests that I love and that made their way into Tears of the Kingdom, it is these mini-scale battles that take place in these open fields. This falls under the quest called Bringing Peace to Hyrule, where you'll find Hoz in different locations across Hyrule. You speak to him and you and his companions will lead the charge against a horde of moblins. These moments are excellent and lend to the oppressive stranglehold that the Demon King and his minions have on Hyrule. It is great to be fighting with people and taking back the kingdom one war at a time, and it is these moments that, whilst not cinematic heavy, they tell a compelling story, and it's these type of events in Tears of the Kingdom that I think are so fascinating. It's these little sub-stories when you go to different environments and meet different people and villages, and you fight back and take back the town, you take back the city, you take back different areas within Hyrule, you fight and you really do feel like you are in the midst of a war. It's a great little form of storytelling that just fleshes out the world of Hyrule in new ways that the previous game did not, and I think that these additions are so welcomed and they really do bring the overall urgency and state of Hyrule to life. On top of these side quests, you will stumble across a wealth of enticing side content whilst adventuring in Hyrule. Some of these different forms of content are in the form of these moblin fortresses and bases. Like I mentioned, these are cities and little towns that have been overrun by moblins, and you'll have to fight an onslaught of them to take them back and bring peace to the people in these areas. Meanwhile, down in the depths, there is a plethora of colosseums that pose some of the most threatening enemies and challenges found in Tears of the Kingdom. But the rewards, trust me, they are all worth it, and they make these challenges, if not for completing the challenge itself, but the reward worth overcoming. There are so many different activities and unique enemies to occupy these three planes you'll travel. So many quests reward you with their own set of exciting little side attractions too, like building your own house, blueprints and schematics for crafting, and different outfits and cosmetics too, to help you style Link the way you like. On top of all of that, there are collectibles from Breath of the Wild such as Korok seeds, cooking recipes that see a return, alongside many new currencies and collectibles such as Bumble Gems and Sage Wheels. If you're going full completionist mode here, there is tons of different activities and collectibles to cross off the checklist and hundreds of hours worth of playtime. What I love about exploration in Tears of the Kingdom is how one discovery can cleverly point to another discovery. An example of this is taking the light roots from the depths. It is uncovered that the light roots correlate to a location of a shrine directly above it on the Hyrule field, and vice versa. So this little tactic comes in handy if you've figured out where a light root is but not a shrine, then you can kind of pinpoint that location and mark it on your map and figure out where it is on the other plane. And likewise, if you have found a shrine but not that respective light root, then you can be traversing the depths and place a map marker correlating to where that shrine is and help pinpoint where you can find that light root. These little things come in handy because they don't give it away to you, but they do help nudge you in the right direction, and it is great how unified the whole world and each plane of Hyrule feels, and how interconnected the whole land feels and the whole world of Hyrule feels. I reached the 100-hour mark with this game and decided to take a break, but I do come back to Tears of the Kingdom from time to time just to uncover more of its mysteries, and even to this date, months after its release, I'm still discovering so much and feel like I'm still only halfway there with everything that I've uncovered. It just feels like there is so much there to discover that it actually is just incredible to me how they managed to put this all into that little cartridge. So now we'll be diving into the spoiler section of the story for Tears of the Kingdom. Man, this part of the experience did wonders for me. I was so engaged and invested from the start, and many of the different primary and side objectives in this game thread back into the main story in a stronger and more impactful way than I felt in the past. Tears of the Kingdom in this department did an excellent job blending the old and the new. It's amazing getting to go on these adventures with different sages in Tears of the Kingdom. It feels like Link and Hyrule are fighting back against the Demon King and his army, and this is felt through both the side content, like I mentioned before, where you are pushing back the threats, and also these adventures that you go on with the sages, where you get to see their independent struggles. The thematic design of Hyrule is so clever. The light sky isles that are the remnants of the sages and Rauru, the Hyrule fields in the middle, and the dark depths of the Demon King and his army that lurk below. These different planes don't just work well in terms of variety of gameplay and location, but also for the overall feeling and mystery of Hyrule. The upheaval and the ancient war that has resurfaced in Hyrule for you to uncover its secrets, it still blows my mind just how unified many of the components of Tears of the Kingdom are, from their presentation, mechanics, and correlation to the story and its themes. I think this is one thing that I really do love about Tears of the Kingdom. It takes these three vertical planes and shows, two opposite ends fighting in an age-old war, and you are in the middle, having to bring peace and solve this conflict. And I feel like it feeds so well into the name of the game. Tears of the Kingdom is a play on words for Tears of the Kingdom as well, and it makes sense. The world is being physically torn apart with chasms that are rooting into the ground and the sky isles being ripped into the sky. But it is also the tears emotionally, as this world and Hyrule is seeing a live conflict unfold. But one of the big things to me was it was crazy seeing Ganon take form and return in this game. Witnessing his rise, his destruction, and fighting to defeat him was just incredible. The ending of Tears of the Kingdom is one of the most satisfying conclusions to a game I've experienced this year and in a long time. I actually genuinely got shivers throughout that final main quest. Although it's a familiar scenario, I mean, you're not going to finish a Zelda game and not save Zelda and not beat Ganon. It's definitely, par for the course. But the way that they handled this, it really encapsulates what I love about Zelda so much, and what I think many love about Zelda. That grandeur, that sense of adventure, that open world of Hyrule that is there at your fingertips to explore, and this ultimate culmination that results in a showdown with your antagonist, Ganon, and saving Zelda. And they just do it in the most satisfying manner possible here, and they handle it with such love and care that I think perfectly encapsulates what's so charming about the Legend of Zelda series. Tears of the Kingdom is one experience that I won't forget, and its story definitely is one that stuck with me and is one that I hold in much higher regard out of the Zelda games that I have played, which is only really a handful, but still means a lot to me. So now we'll be getting into the sound and visuals for Tears of the Kingdom. And the visuals for Tears of the Kingdom are what we'll kick it off with. So the general art direction follows the same suit as Breath of the Wild, carrying it on here and looking as lovely as it did in 2017. Tears of the Kingdom has a very beautiful art style, and as lovely as it is, you can really start to see the age of the Nintendo Switch. But still, Nintendo have been able to make this game look really nice given the hardware limitations that they've had to face. And it isn't surprising given the fact that they've had the talented team at Monolith Soft helping them with much of the optimization throughout development. The visuals in terms of performance are solid and they look really nice, and the frame rate is generally pretty consistent 30 FPS. I've only ever encountered 2 noticeable stutters throughout my 100 hours playing the game. For Tears of the Kingdom, the overall visual presentation is beautiful, creating an incredible atmosphere for each biome, town, and landscape. Like seriously, whether it's the sandy dunes of the Gerudo hometown to the Zora's domain, it is wonderful. It is so varied, and I think that is one incredible thing that they've been able to encapsulate here so well in Tears of the Kingdom. Nintendo have created stunning landscapes in these new sandbox games, and a good variety of creatures that inhabit this world. The first time I saw the Gloom Hands, I had a menacing shiver that washed over me, and I still remember them to this day. The first discovery of the light route was absolutely stunning. This visual presentation, this light in the dark when traversing the depths, is something that was absolutely stunning to me. And falling from each tower and just taking in the world around you below is just so grand and encapsulates the sentiment that many open world games pride themselves on. Go anywhere you want, except Zelda lets you do it. freely from the get-go. I'll never get over just how beautiful the world of Hyrule is depicted in these games. It is so gorgeous to just take in and explore, whether you're climbing a mountain and seeing the world around you, whether you're being shot up in the air from a tower. There is just so much here in this world, and there is so many unique towns, villages, people, and enemies to just encounter and get lost in. And I think that this depiction of Hyrule is one that'll always stick with me and many others. Now I want to move on to more the sound for Tears of the Kingdom, which oscillates between these ambient, light, orchestral pieces that whisper through the winds of your travels to this more grand, uplifting, triumphant pieces that play after you complete many of the feats throughout the game. What is incredible to me is just how the music accompanies you in your travels, feeling like it is one with the breeze, guiding you towards your next wild adventure, or ringing of a deep horn as you descend into the dark depths below. Tears of the Kingdom's music, sound choices, and even lack of sounds at times makes you so engrossed in its world, where you sometimes are just taking it in and taking in the ambience and feeling like you are just lost in the world. It makes great use of just having simple things like light music and having the wind blow and having these soft little things that just make you feel like you are actually traversing through a world and just making your way through each little adventure. And it is this nice little icing on the cake that really brings this world and this sense of adventure to life. So now I want to bring everything together. It's been a long video and I appreciate you making it this far. So in closing, Tears of the Kingdom is a monumental achievement for Nintendo. The fact that they've been able to get this game running on the Nintendo Switch and have it run with this level of depth, both in its abilities and how they are able to manipulate the environment and the physics, but how the environment and world interact with both the world and the player is astonishing. Breath of the Wild really did lay out a new schematic, blueprint, whatever you want to call it, for the Legend of Zelda series back in 2017 when it arrived, and Tears of the Kingdom has really doubled down on this in many ways that many would not even imagine possible. Topping Breath of the Wild was no easy feat, but Nintendo have managed to do it here with Tears of the Kingdom. It provides more aspects of the traditional Legend of Zelda experience, but still embodies many of what makes Breath of the Wild's DNA. The world of Hyrule has never felt more interactive, expansive, and full of activities to complete. Tears of the Kingdom captured and enthralled me all over again. I wondered, how could I find this? Having that magic revealed to me with Breath of the Wild, how could I have that again? But Tears of the Kingdom has managed to make it feel like you are wandering and venturing into Hyrule for the first time all over again, whilst remaining rewarding to those who are previously familiar with Hyrule and spent hours upon hours in it previously. I spent about 3 hours alone on the starting island just exploring and experimenting with the mechanics of this game, and what a beautiful visuals and fantastical soundtrack that made every moment of this feel so memorable and heroic as it did in 2017. It had me invested more this time around with its story, its characters, and the events that transpired, and whilst it still isn't the most significant selling point of this entry, it managed to have me hooked to the very end with a satisfying epic conclusion that'll stick with me for a long time. I'll be honest with you all, I've clocked over 100 hours with this game and seen its story to its conclusion, and I'm still returning to this game to cross off any leftover side activities, shrines, or any other activities on the side that I may have missed. It's crazy to think, but with over 100 hours in this game, I still feel like I've barely scratched the surface in terms of the level of depth, mastery, and things that I could see in Tears of the Kingdom. And this is what I want to close off this review on: the level of curiosity and creativity, these essential pillars that Tears of the Kingdom has effortlessly managed to make so brilliant. This way that it is able to make you want to continuously return, experiment, play around with its sandbox, play around with its tools, play around with any object you can find and make it work, make it your own creation, and discover something new. And I think that this is something that will keep this game alive for a very long time and will make it a classic for years to come. The beauty of Tears of the Kingdom isn't finishing the game, it's returning to it, discovering new things, not just in terms of caves or shrines, but discoveries in terms of the things you build and create and seeing what other creators make online. It truly is a fantastic experience, and it is one that I'll look back on so fondly, and it's without a doubt a Game of the Year contender and will be a game that people will celebrate for years to come. Tears of the Kingdom is an iconic game and one for the ages, and I think that if you are looking for a game to play this year, you are in luck because there is a wealth of many fantastic games to play, and I think Tears of the Kingdom is one on the top of the list that you should be considering. It is a game that you can get lost in. It's a game that you can pick up and play with a simple system to grasp but a difficult system to master. It is boundless in what you can discover and create, and to me that is the sign of a timeless classic. I really do recommend Tears of the Kingdom. Thank you for watching, and I know this has been a long video, so I really do appreciate you sticking around to the end and watching this video. I've tried to gather all my thoughts and pull it into one big definitive video to just talk about how much I actually love this game. So I really do appreciate you watching this video. If you have made it this far, maybe consider liking and subscribing, as it really does help out the channel, and I will be covering a lot of the new big upcoming games in the next few months and a few other things on the side. So if you're looking forward to that type of content, consider hitting the subscribe button and joining the community. I'd love to hear from you in the comments section and get a conversation going. What did you love about Zelda? What do you love about many other games? What would you like me to cover and talk about? All these questions I'd be happy to answer, so feel free to comment or like, sub, whatever you feel like doing. But thank you for watching and tuning in today, and have a good one. I'll see you in the next video.